welcome to this interview. Maybe can you briefly explain your name, the company, and your role in the company?
Yeah, sure. Name is Allessandro Pilotti. I'm the CEO at Cloudbase Solutions.
Cool. And what was the most exciting news that you had during this event?
Well, there are a couple of things. So first, it's nice to see a shift towards confidential computing. So this is something I found very, very interesting. I like all the governmental cloud developments that happen in this space. I think OpenStack has a huge space in that environment. Let's say compared especially to hyperscalers and so on, hyperscalers.
And what was for you the most important news that you heard during this event?
Well, we are involved in many sides of the communities here. One of them is the Ceph type of thing, so we do a lot of Ceph interoperability. And we have, for example, we were quite excited to see a lot of interest around the work we did around porting Ceph to Windows, So there were a lot of questions, especially after a couple of years of pandemics. It's very nice to get back and taste the pulse of the situation. Get people actually getting real feedback from people in person. Makes quite a difference.
And what are the most challenging parts that you have now for your organization?
Well, so I think it's a very interesting period for people in our domain, because. Think about the evolution of OpenStack, right? Now it's clear that there is a space, of course, for both hyperscalers, there is a space for private clouds, there is a space for edge, So I think what is very challenging and interesting for companies like ours, is making sure we tackle all those particular spaces and we provide services and products which are sitting on top of that, giving value to our users and customers,
Yeah, and do you have any specific direction for that? So because the area that you need to cover is really wide, do you have any focused area where you focus on?
Well, there are multiple ones. Of course, one of them is making sure that OpenStack can deploy in the easiest and less frictionless option possible. That's one area. The second thing is to have Kubernetes integrate in the most seamless possible way, both in a hyperscaler scenario and on top of OpenStack, which is what we are actively doing at the moment. And another thing is to move beyond the concept of containers, and that's a lot of work that we're doing, especially around WASM and around the new concepts related to working towards smaller workloads and simplified use cases that allow, let's say, significantly higher density and less complexity, which is the future for us.
Yeah, less complexity would be really great. What kind of open source development is really important for your organization?
Yeah. Well, there are multiple ones. OpenStack remain an important step for our organizations. We were big contributors back in the day, and we still continue to support and contribute to OpenStack. So that's one of the things. Kubernetes, of course, is something you cannot live without these days. So we are upstream contributors there. We do a lot of work in that space, including collateral projects like Containerd and things like this. Ceph is an area where we contribute a lot. As I mentioned before, we ported Ceph to Windows, and that is an area where we see a lot of traction. So I had a session now just like an hour ago, which was pretty full, with a lot of very positive feedback around that. And as I mentioned before, the idea to move beyond the concept of containers, so the new challenging open source projects that come out of that, so that's where things are getting interesting.
Yeah, and maybe that's come also back to my last question is, what do you need in the future from the open source community to move forward?
Yeah, we have a fragmented set of communities at the moment. One thing that was relatively frustrating, for example, when Kubernetes came out, was that we solved a lot of problems in the OpenStack community, and I saw the same problem being faced in Kubernetes and failing in the same identical ways. So I'd like to see more collaboration between communities and more, let's say, exchange of information about how to not repeat the same mistakes twice, to say so. There will be a time in which new projects come out, and I would like to see more a continuum in that direction instead of just reinventing the wheel all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good view in the future. I cannot more agree on that. I think cooperation is one of the key successes of running open source software. Thank you very much for this interview, and we'll see you maybe next year in Vancouver.
Okay. Thank you very much.